Officer Daniel Green was the kind of man who believed in doing the right thing, even when no one was watching. Sheriff Calvin Ridge was the kind of man who built his empire in the shadows. When their paths collided on a quiet night in Maple Ridge, only one would walk away and the truth about what really happened would shake the entire town to its core. Officer Daniel Green was known around Maple Ridge as the kind of cop who never turned his back on a neighbor in need. He wasn't the loudest or the toughest, but he was steady, trustworthy, and always showed up. People waved at him from their porches. Kids called him Officer Dan, and his cruiser was a familiar sight patrolling the quiet roads that wound through the small town. Something dark had entered the town, something no one was ready for. Candlelight vigils were held outside the town hall, and flowers piled up near the steps of the police station. Officer Green had no known enemies, no complaints on record, and no disciplinary actions in his file. There were audio clips of phone calls, photos taken with a long-range lens, and pages of typed observations. He suspected that someone in Maple Ridge was operating a covert drug ring, and he hadn't told anyone in the department. Why hadn't Green gone through official channels? Why had he kept the investigation secret? And if Maris wasn't involved, who was? The sense of mystery deepened, and with it, the fear that Officer Green had uncovered something far more dangerous than he realized. The name that came up most often in the files was Levi Maris, a local auto mechanic with a criminal past. The murder of Officer Green had shaken Maple Ridge to its core, and the lack of answers was beginning to stir unrest. The serial number confirmed it belonged to him. Forensic analysis revealed it was the same weapon used in the shooting, solving one part of the mystery. But it was the fingerprints on the grip that stopped the investigation cold. They didn't match any known criminals or suspects. Instead, they belonged to Sheriff Calvin Ridge, the man leading the investigation and the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the county. Behind the scenes, investigators pored over every file, every minute of surveillance footage, and every recorded phone call made within a 5-mile radius of the crime scene. Forensic teams re-examined the woods, this time using specialized metal detectors and sonar imaging to scan underground. Their persistence paid off when a park ranger stumbled upon something partially buried in a shallow creek just outside the original search zone. Green's notes detailed odd behavior, cash exchanges late at night, and unlisted visitors entering Maris's garage through a back door. His fellow officers described him as quiet, methodical, and deeply committed to his job. But while the town mourned, the investigation moved forward with growing urgency. He had been shot twice, once in the chest, and once clean through the head. There was no sign of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the scene. His last known patrol route had taken him past the northern logging trails, rarely used roads that only locals knew well. Something must have drawn him there. When investigators searched his home, they didn't find anything out of place. He still worked at the same garage and lived alone on the outskirts of town. Investigators brought him in for questioning. He didn't resist, answered calmly, and provided proof that he'd been working late the night Green was killed. Security cameras at a nearby diner showed him picking up food around the same time the murder occurred. The timeline didn't fit. Maris was released, and his name, for the moment, was crossed off the list. But at the station, tucked behind a panel inside his locker, they discovered something unusual: a small flash drive taped behind a clipboard. It was unmarked and not part of any logged evidence. What they found on it changed the direction of the case. His service weapon was missing, along with his badge. Whoever had done this had vanished without a trace. On April 17th, everything changed. That morning, his patrol car was found idling beside an old, unpaved service road that cut through a dense patch of woods just outside town. The driver's side door was wide open, the seat still warm. His radio was on, crackling with static. Officer Green was nowhere in sight. At first, no one thought the worst. Maybe he'd gone into the woods to help someone. Maybe he was tracking something. But when he didn't respond to radio calls, the alarm bells started ringing. Backup arrived quickly. Officers and local volunteers formed a search team and moved through the thick undergrowth, calling his name. Less than an hour later, a police dog led them to a clearing where something dark was half buried beneath fallen leaves and branches. It was him. Officer Green's body lay still, his uniform stained with blood. News of the killing spread fast. For a town like Maple Ridge, where crime was mostly limited to noise complaints and the occasional stolen bike, the murder of a police officer felt like a nightmare. The chief of police called in state investigators. By noon, the crime scene was sealed off, drones buzzed overhead, and forensic teams combed through the forest inch by inch. But clues were scarce. The car didn't have fingerprints other than Green's. The radio logs showed nothing unusual. There were no nearby homes, no security cameras, no eyewitnesses. Just a dead officer, a haunted town, and 1,000 unanswered questions. Maple Ridge had always felt safe, but that illusion cracked the moment Officer Green's body was pulled from the woods. In the days that followed, the community of Maple Ridge struggled to process what had happened. Inside the department, detectives began to review every aspect of Green's recent movements. The flash drive held dozens of personal notes, dated and time-stamped. Officer Green had been investigating something on his own. Levi Maris had been arrested over a decade ago for drug possession, but had kept a low profile since then. The discovery of the flash drive raised more questions than it answered. Weeks passed with no solid leads, and pressure from the public continued to mount. It was Officer Green's missing service weapon, coated in silt and rusting from water exposure. Sheriff Ridge was a 30-year veteran of the force and considered a pillar of the community. He had spoken at Green's funeral, hugged grieving family members, and made public promises that justice would be served. Hidden in a locked cabinet behind a wall panel in Ridge's cabin was a burner phone, several unregistered firearms, and a duffel bag filled with stacks of cash. But one major question remained. Did Ridge kill Officer Green, or was someone else carrying out the dirty work? He claimed Officer Green had stumbled onto his activities by accident and that he had tried to warn him off, but never ordered or committed any violence. Investigators, however, were not willing to take his word for it. According to Ridge's confession, Briggs followed Green into the woods when Green veered off the highway and parked near the service road. In his garage, investigators found a pair of boots with traces of forest mud and a glove bearing a single drop of Green's blood. Briggs, overwhelmed and visibly shaken, made a full confession. He described how Ridge had manipulated him, using fear and promises to pull him deeper into the scheme. During his trial, he showed no emotion, even as former colleagues testified against him. Several officers resigned, and new leadership was brought in from outside the county. Town officials held public forums to rebuild trust, and a permanent memorial was established in front of the police station to honor Officer Daniel Green. The most damning evidence came from the secret recordings on the burner phone, where his voice could be heard planning logistics, moving money, and instructing Briggs to deal with anyone who got in the way. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 40 years in federal prison. The truth was clear. The sheriff had created a world of corruption, and in the end, it consumed both him and the officer who had trusted him the most. Briggs confronted him, tried to intimidate him, but Green resisted. His quiet determination had brought the truth to light, even at the cost of his life. Though Maple Ridge would carry the scars of betrayal for years to come, it also carried the memory of an officer who refused to look away, even when it meant standing alone. Reporters flooded Maple Ridge, turning the quiet town into a media hotspot, and promises of advancement, then with threats and blackmail. Briggs claimed he never meant to kill Officer Green, only to frighten him into backing off. But when the situation escalated, fear overtook reason. The courtroom remained silent as he recounted the final moments, Green reaching for his radio, the shot, the second shot, then silence. Briggs was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Courtrooms overflowed with spectators, and every detail of the case was dissected across headlines and talk shows. The weight of the evidence left little room for defense. Prosecutors presented forensic reports, financial records, audio logs from the burner phone, and the testimonies of both Ridge and Briggs. The story that unfolded was one of deception, greed, and a betrayal of trust that ran deeper than anyone could have imagined. A struggle broke out. Briggs panicked and pulled Green's own weapon on him. 2 shots were fired. Ridge claimed he arrived minutes later and helped cover it up, taking the weapon, wiping it down, and disposing of it in the creek while Briggs fled the scene. The evidence found at his cabin painted a much darker picture, one of control, power, and manipulation. Still, there was no direct proof linking him to the moment Officer Green died. That proof came soon after, thanks to a small bloodstain discovered on the cabin's inner doorframe, nearly invisible to the naked eye. The truth, as it turned out, was even more twisted. There were also blueprints for a remote facility and a list of names, some crossed out, some circled. Chemical containers found in the cabin matched materials used in methamphetamine production. The evidence pointed to Ridge not only knowing about illegal activity but actively running a drug operation from the shadows. Now, he was a suspect. When questioned, Ridge claimed he had no idea how his prints ended up on the weapon. He insisted he'd never even held Green's gun, but investigators weren't convinced. A warrant was issued to search his home and office. Pressure mounted, and Ridge's version of events began to crack. Under questioning, he admitted that he wasn't alone in the operation. He had recruited someone to act as his enforcer, someone young, impressionable, and already under his control. That person was Deputy Saul Briggs, a rookie officer who had joined the force just a year earlier. Briggs had been assigned to Officer Green's shift several times and knew his patterns well. Ridge confessed to instructing Briggs to follow Green the night of the murder, not to kill him, but to scare him off the trail. What they found was far worse than anyone expected. His arrest stunned the town. The very person trusted to protect Maple Ridge was now accused of corrupting it from within. Following his arrest, Sheriff Calvin Ridge maintained his innocence in the murder, though he admitted to running a covert drug operation for years. Lab results confirmed the blood belonged to Officer Green. It was the first physical link between the sheriff and the crime scene, but things didn't go as planned. Deputy Briggs was arrested at his home early the next morning. The trials of Sheriff Ridge and Deputy Briggs became the focus of national attention. Deputy Briggs pleaded guilty to first-degree murder. In his statement to the court, he described how Ridge had gradually pulled him in, first with praise. Sheriff Ridge faced a mountain of charges, including conspiracy to commit murder, drug trafficking, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. The fallout was immense. The entire Maple Ridge Police Department underwent a complete restructuring under state supervision. Green's legacy lived on. His bravery had not only uncovered a web of corruption but forced an entire system to reckon with its failures.